Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 4 must-start players for the 2022 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about must-start players, but not the normal must-start candidates. Not guys that are top 12 players, not like a Khalil Herbert or a Jamal Williams going into Week 4, who we know are going to find automatic success, but players who are currently being started in less than 30% of Yahoo leagues. Players who you should be reconsidering as a flex option going into the week based on the current circumstances, the injuries that have taken place around these players, and the matchups that they have going into Week 4. We'll talk about all that. I'll give you guys statistics to justify the reasons as to why we're starting these players. But of course, before we get into all of that, I want to review how last week went, how our overall current record is in terms of must-start players thus far this season, because accountability is everything. So we'll go ahead, we'll gloss over that, give you guys some perspective as to how we did last week. Then at the end of today's episode, we'll put together some pick'em slips via Underdog Fantasy in order to go ahead and potentially win some money this upcoming weekend for myself and you guys. So if you're interested, let's get into it, shall we? Before we begin, if you have not yet already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're making fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2022 season with the singular goal of trying to help you win a 2022 fantasy football championship. And how we get there is by winning our Week 4 matchups, specifically with the must-start players we're going to talk about. Also, like I mentioned, Underdog Fantasy, if you guys haven't checked them out yet, go down to the description of the video and click on the link and use promo code ANDREW when you sign up today and make a first-time deposit. You'll be given a first-time deposit match up to $100. So not only can you participate in this upcoming weekend's pick'em segment, but you can also go ahead, draft some teams, and win some money, have some fun outside of your own main leagues the Underdog way. Thank you very much. All right, let's get into talking about our Week 4 must-starts, but specifically the accountability as to how well we did or how bad we did last week. So we can see our Week 3 results as such. Last week we talked about Dameon Pierce, Romeo Doubs, Chris Olave, Evan Ingram, and Derek Carr all being must-start players of the week because they were all being started in 30% or fewer percentage of leagues on Yahoo formats. As you can see, Dameon Pierce, Romeo Doubs, Chris Olave, and Derek Carr all pulled through for your boy Andrew and had themselves pretty fantastic weeks. Now, in terms of their overall production, Dameon Pierce was the number 10 overall running back in a half PPR. Doubs was the number 12 wide receiver, while Chris Olave was the number 6 wide receiver on the week. Evan Ingram, unfortunately, was tight end 34. That was the big whiff of the week. And Derek Carr finished as the quarterback 6 in an incredible matchup against the Tennessee Titans. Wink, wink. Maybe Matt Ryan may be a play you want to look forward to this week based on that defense not playing well. Either way, 4 out of 5, we'll take that. That's going to be one of the better weeks all season long. As of this current moment in time, last week our record was 5-7. We now incline to a 9-8 record, just barely over 500. We want to continue to go in this direction, and I believe we're exactly going to do that with this week's must-start players. So let's get into this. Our number 1, it is Rashaad Penny, the player that I wanted to first and foremost mention, who I have inside of my top 24 running back rankings for this week, currently only being started in 26% of leagues on Yahoo. Let's talk about what he did late last season and what gives us confidence in his ability going into this upcoming week. Late last season, weeks 14 through 18, he was averaging 18.4 rushing attempts per game, 134.2 rushing yards per game, and 1.2 rushing touchdowns per game. That led to a 21.54 fantasy point per game average. Now, thus far this season, he hasn't really found that level of success. As of thus far, he's been only averaging 10.67 rushing attempts, 47 rushing yards per game, has yet to score a touchdown on the ground, and is averaging 5.53 fantasy points per game. So it's no wonder that many of us aren't starting him right now. But the reason we want to absolutely reconsider Rashaad Penny is because the success he's not only found against this Detroit Lions defense last year, but all the running backs that have found success against the Detroit Lions and will continue to do so based on the fact that this team cannot stop the run and cannot stop opposing running backs thus far this season. Now, to put it in perspective, last season, when Rashaad Penny had an opportunity of taking on the Detroit Lions, he was able to have 25 rushing attempts for 170 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 2 catches on 3 targets for 15 receiving yards, and 31.5 half PPR fantasy points. An incredible performance from Rashaad Penny. And we're not saying that he's going to get to that 30-point level, but we're anticipating a lot of production because let's talk about the fact that the Detroit Lions, they've given up the second most points to opposing running backs thus far this season on average in terms of rushing statistics alone. So rushing yards and rushing touchdowns from weeks 1 through 3. Not only have they given up 287 rushing yards on 63 carries, they've given up 6 rushing touchdowns, which is a 21.57 fantasy point per game average given up to opposing running backs. In week 1, Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, Boston Scott, all 3 of those running backs had a rushing touchdown. Not only that, in week 2, Antonio Gibson had himself a rushing touchdown. This past week, Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison both had rushing touchdowns. This team cannot stop opposing running backs and opposing offenses that want to run the ball. And I'm fully expecting to see this team want to run the ball because they've already shown that they're willing to do so. In weeks 1 and 3, Rashaad Penny had 14 plus touches in both of those games. In fact, in both of those games, he played 70% of the offensive snaps. In week 2, yes, he only played 41% of the offensive snaps. And like we expected, he didn't see too many touches. But in those 2 weeks where they wanted to go ahead and commit to him as their starting back and give him the touches, he was present. It's just a matter of that ever elusive touchdown, which as of this current moment in time, the Detroit Lions are giving away as charity every single week to a starting opposing running back. Not only are we going to see Amon-Ra St. Brown and DeAndre Swift missing from the opposing team, there's a chance that DJ Chark misses. This opens up a lot of opportunity for this to be a closer game in which the Seattle Seahawks can mount a lead and run the ball heavily in that second half against a very poor run-stopping defense for the Lions. All right, let's move on to our next prospect. We're talking about Greg Dortch. Now, in this current circumstance, we have multiple players that are potentially going to miss for the Arizona Cardinals. Not only do we have confirmation that AJ Green is going to be out with his knee injury, but there's a potential that Rondale Moore, who has not participated in any of the games thus far this season, could very easily miss his 4th game of the season due to the hamstring injury that has, pretty much plagued him all season long. He is currently questionable. He has been limited all week throughout practice. And for those of you who have kept tabs on Greg Dortch, who is only being started in 10% of leagues right now on Yahoo, he was dealing with a back injury. He was a full participant early this morning, which gives us confidence. And if you want to hear me talk about Greg Dortch, here it is. In my opinion, he could very easily be a top 36 wide receiver by the end of the week, if not better, because he's already proven to be that level of production. Not only is he the number 23 overall wide receiver in half PPR, he's the number 19 overall wide receiver thus far this season through the first 3 weeks in a full PPR scoring format. In a half PPR, he has had 9.8 points, 13.5, and 12.5. He's finished as the number 34, the number 23, and the number 26 overall wide receiver in those 3 consecutive games. Overall, he's seeing a high level of opportunity, 9 targets, 4 targets, 10 targets. Last week, 9 catches, 80 receiving yards, primarily the slot receiver. And if Rondale Moore is going to be questionable, limited in any capacity, we absolutely anticipate to see Greg Dortch have himself another great week here. Because in the matchup against the Carolina Panthers, this may be another contest where the Arizona Cardinals struggle out the gates, aren't able to score early, and because of that, they have to throw the ball a lot with Kyler Murray late in the contest. They abandon the running game and look for their receiving options. Not only Marquise Hollywood Brown, not only Zach Ertz, but their number 3 in this option. It is Greg Dortch going forward into week 4. Moving on, let's talk about another wide receiver. It is Josh Palmer. We got confirmation just before the recording of this video that in fact Keenan Allen is going to be out for week 4. Now this not only opens up incredible opportunity for Josh Palmer, but in my opinion, again, it makes him a must-start player. A guy that's only being started in 6% of leagues must be started going into this week for matchup against the Houston Texans of all defenses. Now, in the last 2 weeks, we have seen Joshua Palmer, without Keenan Allen in the lineup, have 8 targets, 4 catches, 30 yards, and a touchdown. That was a great game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And in the following week, 9 targets, 6 catches, 99 receiving yards against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Incredible production in the last 2 weeks, and he's been able to continue to increase his overall opportunity of snap play. In week 1, only played 75% of the offensive snaps. In week 2, 91%. In week 3, 90%. While he's playing an increased number of snaps out wide, opposite of Mike Williams. While Mike Williams is going to be pulling double coverage, we have Josh Palmer on the other side of the field getting a lot of opportunity, playing 57, 66, and most recently 79% of his snaps out wide. This is a lot of opportunity for this young wide receiver who is still trying to make his way into this offense and be a every week guy for the Los Angeles Chargers. And with Justin Herbert earlier today fully participating at practice, this gives me that much more confidence. And if you guys were wondering how the matchup is against the Houston Texans, they're giving up about 25.43 fantasy points per game and a half PPR on average to opposing wide receivers. We've seen Michael Pittman Jr., 9 catches, 121, and a touchdown in week 1. Cortland Sutton, the week following, 7 catches for 122, had himself a touchdown called back, but neither here or there. Who's counting? I am. And then we also saw last week, week 3, they took on the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears don't have any relevant wide receivers. So it's kind of skewed in the direction of, hey, maybe this is a tougher matchup. It's not. It is a very advantageous matchup. And I personally believe that Josh Palmer is going to find success because he's already done it in the past. You go back to week 16 of the 2021 season against the Houston Texans, 5 catches, 43 yards, and a touchdown. He's been able to put up great points. I'm expecting him to continue to do the same against the Houston Texans defense. Moving on to our number 4, we have Russell Gage taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Listen, if in fact we're going to see Chris Godwin and Julio Jones once again miss another week here. Chris Godwin is still dealing with the hamstring injury and the ACL recovery. He did not practice on Thursday in any capacity, so that leads me to believe that Chris Godwin may be shut down and not going to play in week 4. Julio Jones, of course, is dealing with that slight PCL tear. That's what Ezekiel Elliott dealt with all of last year, and he was obviously a shell of himself in comparison to what we've seen thus far this season. So what we're expecting to see is potentially Chris Godwin and Julio Jones missing. If not, even if they participate, they could be extremely limited in said participation, more as a potential distractionary measure than anything else. In the week that Russell Gage is coming off of, 13 total targets, 12 catches, 87 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown against Green Bay, and he's currently only being started in 8% of leagues. This is quite surprising to me, especially considering Mike Evans returns, which is going to make the offense that much more efficient. They're going to have more opportunities to, move down the field. Their offense is going to be able to at least move the ball on the ground in comparison to last week. I think this is a perfect opportunity for a slot wide receiver, and we know how much Tom Brady prefers to throw to those slot options on a weekly basis. I think Russell Gage is a perfect flex option going into this week. In a full PPR, this is obviously something that is going to scale in a better direction because we don't need that touchdown dependency any longer. Last week, he ran 76.2% of his routes from the slot position. If we're going to continue to see that, and these other wide receiver options for this offense are not going to be available, again, we got to remember, there's a reason why they brought in Russell Gage 3 years, $30 million this offseason. They wanted to go ahead and get him implemented as a slot receiving option in this offense, and they're exactly doing that right now. Moving on to the final option I wanted to mention, it is Josh Reynolds. We talked about the Detroit Lions when we talked about Rashaad Penny specifically, in the fact that we don't have DeAndre Swift playing this week. Amon-Ra St. Brown, unfortunately, is not going to be playing, and even DJ Chark is questionable to play. So if, in fact, 3 of the primary offensive playmakers of this team are not going to be available, well, we look towards Josh Reynolds, who is currently only being started in 3% of leagues. And Josh Reynolds is coming off of an incredible 2-week performance of week 2, putting up 11.3 fantasy points, and just this last week, 12.6 fantasy points. He had 10 targets, 6 catches, 96 yards last week with Jared Goff. Now, we do expect Jamal Williams to fill in for DeAndre Swift. We do expect Khalif Raymond to fill in for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But who's going to fill in for DJ Chark? He's always typically on the field, and so is Josh Reynolds. In fact, Josh Reynolds in the last 3 weeks, snap counts, 80%, 72%, 79%. He's always on the field, and if he's only going to get more opportunity in terms of targets, snaps, and everything down in the red zone, I expect Josh Reynolds to have himself a big game here for us in week 3. Not only does he take on the Seattle Seahawks defense, who in my opinion could very easily be taken advantage of, Jared Goff has to look for someone that he's comfortable with. And that is Josh Reynolds, because they already have that built-in rapport as they played together in their early days with the Los Angeles Rams. Due to the current circumstance, the injuries that are plaguing this team, Josh Reynolds is an absolute must-start potential candidate that you should be reconsidering going into this upcoming week. All right, that's going to cover our must-start segment for week 4. Hopefully you guys enjoy these players, and hopefully they're available potentially on your roster that you can go ahead and play them. We will have updated rankings on Sunday morning, live streaming at 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for those of you who are interested to see where these guys land in my top 36 wide receiver rankings. Of course, you're welcome to join us and get some of your questions answered throughout that stream. Now that we're going to go ahead and move on to our pick'em segment for today's video, giving you guys some perspective as to which pick'ems I extremely like going into this upcoming weekend via Underdog Fantasy. Again, if you guys haven't checked them out, there's a link down in the description. When you sign up today using promo code Andrew, not only are you giving yourself more of an opportunity to play fantasy football on the daily, but you can go ahead, get involved in contests where you don't have players starting. Maybe you don't have somebody involved in that London game Sunday morning between the Saints and the Minnesota Vikings, and you're going to be up early anyway Sunday morning, worrying about your lineup. You might as well go ahead, put together a pick'em slip for that game, and get yourself ready to go. So first and foremost on the list, we have the Minnesota Vikings game taking on the New Orleans Saints. There's a lot of conversation as to what the heck we're going to see. Michael Thomas is not going to be active. Jameis Winston is not going to be active. Can we expect the Minnesota Vikings to have themselves a bounce back week here, specifically Justin Jefferson? Can we anticipate Andy Dalton to facilitate in this offense and allow a player like Chris Olave to step up? Let's go ahead and let's put together a couple pick'em slips. I want to go ahead and highlight my favorite players for the week. So first and foremost, I like Chris Olave. The level of production that we witnessed from Andy Dalton and Darnell Mooney within the Bears offense last season gives me confidence in Chris Olave this week. I personally believe that there is a very good chance that the higher is going to hit in terms of his overall receiving yards. Without Michael Thomas out there, And in a matchup in which they have to score in order to keep up with the Minnesota Vikings, this is going to be a contest where Chris Olave is going to be playing for a majority of the game. And they already know, based on the way that they've constructed this offense, that they have to get him involved. For those of you who are still worried about the Andy Dalton conversation, let's just put this in perspective. Just look at what exactly the Bears are doing in this offense this year. Look at what Darnell Mooney has done this year in comparative to last year. The yardage, the fantasy points per game, the amount of opportunities were all because of Andy Dalton last year. There's a reason why Darnell Mooney was able to get to 141 total targets. It wasn't because of Justin Fields. It was because of Andy Dalton and his efforts. I'm expecting this your rookie wide receiver to have himself a third consecutive incredible week here. I'm going higher on his receiving yards. I like Michael Pittman Jr. also to go higher on his overall receiving yards, taking on the Tennessee Titans. We have seen just this last week, Mac Hollins go for over 100 against the Tennessee Titans defense. I know Devontae Adams didn't find much success, but he wasn't given, a good quality of opportunity. 10 targets, sure, but, half of them were incomplete. I'm expecting Matt Ryan to have himself a big game here, elevate Michael Pittman to the next level. And not only do we see, Mac Hollins last week, the week prior, we saw Stephon Diggs go for 3 receiving touchdowns, over 100 receiving yards, over double-digit catches. Incredible performances from a lot of wide receivers against this defense thus far this season. Now, speaking of Chicago, at this current moment, I've gone ahead and I've added a lot of pick'ems with Justin Fields at the tail end of the slip, because I am 100% of the belief that Justin Fields, based on what he has produced in the last couple weeks, is going to be pretty difficult for him to produce more than 190 total yards within this offense. We have not seen that number thus far this season, and I'm not expecting to see that, especially if, in fact, the weather conditions are rainy in that game. I think this is an automatic. I think this is another one of these reasons why you want to go ahead and sign up today using promo code Andrew, because you can go ahead and win some money this week based on just these overall pick'ems and pairing them up with whatever else that you like. Again, there's a lot of pick'ems available, but we're just putting together this one slip as of this moment in time. All right, if we go ahead and scroll down, I really do like the idea of Ezekiel Elliott surpassing his overall rushing attempt total. He's been able to get himself 15 rushing attempts in each of the last 2 weeks. They take on the Washington Commanders. They, as a defense, have not been great. I'm expecting Ezekiel Elliott to get more utilization on the ground in this regard. Honestly, he could very easily surpass this yardage count if you're not too keen on playing the overall rushing attempt number. But that's up to you. That's your prerogative. You want to go ahead and do what you do. The final player that I wanted to mention here is Rashaad Penny. I am absolutely taking the higher in terms of his total rushing yardage. Again, like I mentioned, he's a must-start player. He's going to have an incredible performance against Detroit, in Detroit, no other concerns, and a lot of defense that is probably going to get ran over by Rashaad Penny and the efforts of this entire offense for the Seattle Seahawks. So the prior higher or lower pick'ems makes this following slip. I'm going to go ahead, put together pick'em slip. Again, you can turn on the insurance policy. So if in fact you do get all 5 of them correct, you're still 10 times your money. But if in fact maybe one of these potential pick'ems fails, you at least get some of your money back, 2.5 times the overall potential bet. If you go ahead and just get it, straight up, and you can get all 5 of a potential pick'em slip correct, you are 20 timesing your overall investment here. So again, it's up to you what you want to go ahead and do. I myself always seem to manage to find one of these incorrect on a slip, so I'm just going to go ahead. I'll take the 10x. That sounds great to me. Put together this pick'em slip. Let's confirm that, and we're good to go for this weekend. Again, don't forget there are a bunch of pick'em slips that you can go ahead and put together in regards to a bunch of players playing this upcoming weekend for the week 4 slate of Sunday, giving you guys, look, even just in the last couple minutes, they've put up an Andy Dalton pick'em slip that if in fact you're interested in going ahead and picking higher or lower in regards to its overall passing yardage, you can go ahead and get involved there. But again, there's going to be a lot that you can go ahead and involve yourself with. Look at Josh Allen alone. Has himself literally 8 different stats that you can consider higher or lower on going into the matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. But nonetheless, I want to thank you guys for watching today's channel. Again, if you want to go ahead and sign up today using promo code Andrew, you'll be given a first-time deposit match up to $100. So for those of you who are interested in that, be sure to go down to the description of the video, click on the link, and sign up today. Put together some pick'em slips and have some fun the underdog way. I want to thank you guys for watching. Tomorrow, we will be live streaming here on the channel for a couple hours. It'll be from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be answering questions, giving you guys some context as to some of the injuries and which players we want to potentially be going after in terms of some must-start players, must-sit players, and guys that maybe we just want to go ahead, give them another week, just see what they're potentially able to produce and move forward. Honestly, I'm looking at this number from Treylon Burks, 40 receiving yards. Man, if they're going to really involve him this week, that could be something that we can get 41 or higher. Another one of these numbers, Matt Ryan, 2 touchdowns, looks like it's a relatively achievable number. Again, when I scroll down this list, I find myself continuing to add stuff and continuing to add pick'ems in a given week. For those of you who are looking for context as to how we did on last week's pick'ems, it is at the beginning of our waiver wire video on Monday. So if you want, go ahead and check that out. We had won, I think, double our money from last week in terms of the overall pick'ems that we put in during the weekend. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. And until tomorrow during a live stream, Sunday morning live stream, I'll see you guys. Peace.